True crime stories have always held a special place in the public consciousness. It's why even films that feature very little truth are still lauded as being true stories, and audiences eat it up.
What happened was true.
Because there's something so much more visceral when we're watching a story that's actually happened. But we as an audience strive for a satisfying conclusion. And the honest truth is that real life doesn't always tie up in a nice bow. There are loose strands that are meant to hang there, never knowing their true purpose. And if you were in the Bay Area in the late 60s and early 70s, there are few more haunting than the Zodiac Killer, a man who murdered multiple people and terrorized police with mysterious ciphers containing clues to his identity. Only there's a catch. They never found the guy. Would an audience accept a serial killer mystery where the killer is never truly caught? Let's parse through all the takes and see what we can dig up as we look at what happened to David Fincher's Zodiac.
I'm not the Zodiac. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
Robert Graysmith wrote his true crime book Zodiac back in 1986 and sold over 4 million copies. He sold the film rights to Shane Salerno, who was able to set the film up at Touchstone Pictures. But this proposed film wouldn't even follow the real-life killings, and would instead look at a fictional story where the Zodiac Killer returns, this time terrorizing Los Angeles in modern day. Thankfully, that film was never made. Writer James Vanderbilt had been obsessed with Graysmith's book since reading it in high school, and he told producer Brad Fisher as much when he asked him about his dream project. Fisher then contacted Graysmith to see about getting the rights, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect, as Disney had just lost the rights, and so Graysmith was looking for suitors. And he chose James and Brad to get Zodiac rolling in front of cameras. Vanderbilt's first choice of director was always David Fincher, whose work on Seven impressed the filmmaker. At the time, Fincher was deeply into prep work on his film The Black Dahlia, which he would soon drop out of and would be taken over by Brian De Palma. This gave him an opening and, with Fincher having interest in the Zodiac Killer since childhood, decided to take on the project. This shocked Vanderbilt, who expected Fincher to pass and never even entertain the idea. Fincher, Vanderbilt, and Fisher spent 3 years talking with witnesses and victims to try and get the best and most truthful version of the story possible. One of the Zodiac's surviving victims, Michael Renaud Maugeot, had gone off the radar. Thankfully, the filmmakers were able to hire a private investigator that was able to track him down, and he provided pivotal information about his near-fatal run-in with the Zodiac Killer. Paramount and Warner Brothers co-financed the picture after talks with MGM fell through, after they wanted a runtime of 2 hours and 15 minutes. While still concerned about the amount of dialogue and inconclusive ending, Paramount and Warner gave Fincher creative freedom to pursue the film that he wanted to make. Fincher would assemble an all-star cast for Zodiac. Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo were immediately in consideration for the roles of Robert Graysmith and David Toschi. Fincher had liked Gyllenhaal's performance in Donnie Darko, and felt that he was capable of playing naive, but also do possessed well. Since the Zodiac Killer encompasses Robert's life to the point of his wife divorcing him, he felt that he could play the obsessed former cartoonist well. For the role of said wife, Chloe Sevigny was cast and is absolutely brilliant. Surprisingly, Ruffalo wasn't interested in the project, but still met with Fincher, who convinced him to take on the role of David Toschi. Both actors met with the people that they were portraying and really shaped their performances around these interactions. Toschi even came down during filming to help clarify design choices for a scene and ended up handing out animal crackers to some of the cast. For the role of his partner, Bill Armstrong, they wanted someone that could portray the most decent guiding light imaginable. He wanted someone that audiences would instinctively trust. And in Fincher's mind, there was no one better fit for the role than Anthony Edwards. Edwards was mostly known for ER at the time, but Fincher mostly knew him as his friendly neighbor. Originally, Fincher actually wanted to reunite with his frequent collaborator Brad Pitt, casting him as Paul Avery, but that unfortunately didn't work out. Robert Downey Jr. had yet to have his career resurgence with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and Iron Man, but they wanted someone who could match Paul Avery's flamboyance and charisma, and he took the part. Hilariously, Ken Narlow actually requested George Clooney play himself, but Fincher never entertained the idea, choosing Donald Logue instead. Dermot Mulroney actually wears a fat suit for his brief scene as Captain Marty Lee because Fincher didn't want him to be fit for his character. For the role of Melvin Belli, the man who Zodiac spoke to on the morning show AM San Francisco, as well as sent a letter to, was originally going to be played by Gary Oldman, but he just didn't have enough weight to him, despite using appliances, so they instead went with Brian Cox. Then the part of Arthur Lee Allen was vital for the movie, as the narrative sets him up as the main suspect. John Carroll Lynch was cast and plays it perfectly down the middle, never giving up his guilt or his innocence.
What do you do for fun?
I love to read. I enjoy books.
Those are the same things.
The story of Zodiac isn't told in a stereotypical way, as Fincher was adamant that it remained truthful. Seeing as how the Zodiac Killer remained on the loose, the entire film was leading to a resolution that would never come, so instead it focuses on the effect that these murders had on the detectives, reporters, and society as a whole. The paranoia that would take hold as a killer remains on the loose, while simultaneously taunting the police with complex coded messages. The murders that we actually see are all based off of witness testimony. If there was no witnesses, then we as an audience are not privy to the actual events. This also resulted in multiple actors playing the role of the Zodiac Killer during the different murder sequences. The filmmakers wanted to match the descriptions, even if it resulted in a bit of inconsistency. They also didn't include the first ever kills of the Zodiac Killer, David Faraday and Betty Jensen, as there were no witnesses to the crime, as both victims had died. Even the clothes are exact recreations of the items that the victims wore the night of their attack. As dedicated to detail as the film is, there's also still plenty that's just done for dramatic effect. Robert Graysmith and David Toschi were never actually friends, but it helped to frame the story that way as it brought the two important characters in the Zodiac lore together. And they were still making a movie after all. Zodiac was shot on Thomson Viper digital cameras, although the slowed down murder sequences were actually done on film. Fincher brought on his The Game director of photography, Harry Savides, who also had shot the credit sequence to Seven. They wanted to avoid making the film look like Seven, and instead wanted a more mundane look, thinking the viewers would more easily accept the truth that way. What looks like a simple tracking shot at the beginning of the movie was actually quite complicated, as Fincher wanted completely smooth movement. Only two issues: when transfixed on the world outside, the camera would shake and sway, and when transfixed on the car, the world outside would wobble and shake. So instead, they laid out nearly 450 feet of dolly track in order to accomplish the shot. This is just one small example of the way that Fincher always went the extra mile to execute his vision. They worked really hard to bring the late 60s and early 70s in San Francisco to life on screen. At one point, there was intended to be a one-take shot following the Zodiac letter as it arrives at the San Francisco Chronicle, but it grew to be too complicated. So they cut it up, allowing to break up the scene a bit while still keeping the intention there of showcasing the importance of the letter and the flippancy with which it arrived to its final destination, which would explode into a series of investigations.
Fincher was totally open to ideas, and he's not the kind of guy who's like, I'm always right. That's what makes him such a great filmmaker. It just made the process a lot more fun and made the movie even better.
One of Fincher's favorite shots in the entire film is actually the push-in on San Francisco, as he wanted to represent certain structures from the era. Given how much the waterfront had changed over the years, this was done entirely through CGI. Fincher is known for his many takes, and not every actor was a fan. Jake Gyllenhaal got particularly frustrated, complaining that they would do upwards of 90 takes.
How many takes do you think?
Hold on a second. 4 and a third on the lens.
15.
There's a moment where he has to throw a book into frame, and you can see his frustration start to mount as he just can't get it to Fincher's liking. It ended up taking 36 takes for something so simple, but there's a reason his films have such a perfection to them. though it seems like Gyllenhaal understands the madness to Fincher's method.
You know, David Fincher is incredible, and his movies are some of the best ever made.
Though hilariously, some excessive takes were due to the actors themselves. Take the bar scene, for example, where Avery does a little trick with straws. This was actually something that Downey Jr. knew how to do in real life and insisted that it be included. However, after so many takes of trying to make sure that it matched for continuity, Robert regretted his creative choice, and it passes in a blink in the finished film. Fincher utilized beautiful matte paintings for several of the shots, which helps further establish the period setting. It's easy to bitch about excessive CGI in current-day cinema, especially when it comes to simple moments like showing the written word. So it's nice to see all the practical tricks used here. Motion-tracked cameras shot for 3 days, picking up various shots of newspaper headlines and writing in books. There's a texture present that you just don't get when going the CGI route. But that's not to say that Fincher isn't a fan of digital effects, as he also utilizes blue screen for various sequences, such as car rides and the kill of the taxi driver. And all of the bullet hits are done digitally, which stands out nearly 20 years later. Fincher did this for practical reasons, as with his many take style, it would have taken up too much time to clean up the practical blood. Zodiac was actually edited on Final Cut Pro, an oddity for a massive studio film. Despite being a consumer product, Fincher believed in it, and the results are quite impressive.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
I need to stand there. I need to look him in the eye, and I need to know that it's him.
Zodiac released in the United States on March 2nd, 2007, and brought in over $13.3 million on its opening weekend. It would end its worldwide tally at over $81 million. Considering its budget of between $65 and $85 million, Zodiac was a box office failure. Thankfully, critics and audiences alike loved the film, with it receiving a 90% and 70% respectively on Rotten Tomatoes. The critical consensus was that Zodiac was a quiet, dialogue-driven thriller that delivers scene after scene of gut-wrenching anxiety. David Fincher also spends more time illustrating nuances of his characters and recreating the mood of the 70s than he does on gory details of murder. We've gotten several physical media releases for Zodiac, and the quality is great, though it should be noted that the film was actually mastered in 1080i, meaning even the recently released 4K is nothing more than an upscale, and we're unlikely to get a truly great 4K version of the film. The director's commentary is a fascinating look at Fincher's process, with him often criticizing or pointing out historical inaccuracies or mistakes that he perceives. Not a surprise given what a perfectionist Fincher is, but his memory is like a steel trap, so it's a must for any Zodiac fan. In the end, Zodiac is a true crime mystery unlike any other. The mystery element is ever present, with no clear conclusion to the Zodiac Killer's motivations, and lacking in that satisfying moment where the culprit is led away in handcuffs. Even the person that the film puts in its crosshairs, Arthur Lee Allen, was said to be innocent by David Toschi, who had access to the evidence. So we're still not left with a concrete answer. Instead, the viewer is left to ponder if we'll ever actually get a satisfying end to this story, or, like most of life, it just ends.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.